Welcome back to Nothing But the Truth. I'm your host, Trudy Stern, and I'm so glad to be here with you as we continue to confront the most urgent issues facing the Jewish people and the world. Anti Semitism is no longer hiding in the shadows. It's marching openly through our cities, echoing on our college campuses, and seeping into the rhetoric of institutions and leaders who once claimed to stand for tolerance. Since October 7th, we've seen a terrifying surge in anti Jewish hatred, violent protests, Jewish students afraid to walk to class, blatant double standards applied to the state of Israel. It's not just overseas, it's here in America, and it's happening in real time. And that's why today's guests could not be more timely. I'm happy to welcome Ellie Cohanim to the show. Ellie served as the U.S. Deputy Special Envoy to monitor and combat anti Semitism at the State Department in the first Trump administration. Born in Iran, Ellie and her family fled the Ayatollah's regime, and she has never stopped speaking out against the dangers of radical extremism. Today, she is a fearless voice in the media and in policy circles, exposing the lies, confronting the hatred, and championing the truth. Ellie, welcome to Nothing But the Truth. We're so glad to have you with us.
Trudy, thank you so much for having me on and for that wonderful introduction.
I can't imagine timing that would be more appropriate to have you on the show. It seems like anti-Semitism is at such a record high. What I would like to hear about is you were the deputy special envoy for combating anti-Semitism back in 2017, 18, 19. How do you see that differently than what has happened since October 7th?
Trudy, that's a great question. The Special Envoy to Combat Anti-Semitism office in the State Department, as you know, is exclusively tasked with dealing with global anti-Semitism, because I always share with people that the U.S. State Department is like the foreign ministry of other countries, right? And so the foreign ministry exclusively deals with foreign policy, global issues. We have, no domestic mandate as required by the U.S. Congress. And so what we were doing was really representing the voice of America, the moral authority of the United States of America on the issue of anti-Semitism in other countries. And, if you kind of try to remember that pre-October 7th world, I think the United States historically has been a wonderful and welcoming place to its Jewish citizens. Certainly, we've had periods of highs and lows in anti-Semitism in this country, and there have been periods where Jews were discriminated against. But nonetheless, the United States was always, I think, the gold standard and held such a strong moral voice on anti-Semitism, so that when I was serving as deputy envoy and having conversations with my foreign counterparts all around the world, I benefited from the fact that the U.S. was in such a strong place where I could represent the government of the United States and President Donald Trump and his administration in really kind of holding foreign countries to task for their domestic anti-Semitism issues. And I would tell you, Trudy, I think the thing that has changed the most, sadly, is that the new anti-Semitism envoy, Rabbi Yehuda Kaplan, who's going to be coming into that office, can no longer look at his foreign counterparts coming from a place of, the U.S. is in such a strong moral place, because sadly we have our own pro-Hamas movement taking root across the country since October 7th.
So that's a very, very interesting point that I don't think our listeners nor myself ever really focused on. So first of all, when you were in that role, the whole department of combating anti-Semitism was really focused on outside of the United States. It was focused on, and just correct me if I'm wrong, it was on other countries outside of the United States, looking at them and trying to hold them to the standard that we undoubtedly had in terms of tolerance and not much anti-Semitism here at home. Is that correct?
Exactly right. So this special envoy position was created by an act of the United States Congress under George W. Bush. And it was created by the US Congress because the members at that time were so alarmed when they were hearing reports of assaults and harassment and vandalization of synagogues and cemeteries in places like Europe and Latin America and around the world. And they felt, the US government needs to take a stance. And so let's create this office and this position within the US State Department so that again they'll bring the moral authority of the United States to task on our foreign counterparts. And so again, what I think is devastating for Americans to see is that we no longer can have that pure moral voice in the conversation. We now have to look domestically and also figure out how do we address our own internal problems, our own internal, spreading Jew hatred that has taken such strong root and caused so much damage to our society since October 7th, when I think all of us were shocked to see that rather than our college students and folks in our cities taking the side of the Jewish victims of the massacre that took place on October 7th, instead they were siding with those who were committing the massacre.
So is there a recognition of the fact that this role that existed, which I believe Elon Carr held that role as the envoy, and you as
the envoy,
and you were the deputy. That this role now has to be reimagined and totally reconfigured, or a new role created for somebody to focus in on the United States, because since October 7th, anti-Semitism is rampant here, and not just on the college campuses, but across our cities. And there needs to be some sort of attention here as well. So is the role now reimagined, or are there two people now in this role, or are we abandoning the looking at other countries and now really focusing on ourselves?
So Trudy, I would say this. Back in 2021, I actually wrote an op-ed in Newsweek where I said the time has come for us to create and appoint a domestic anti-Semitism czar position, because even though things were not as awful as they are right now in terms of the pro-Hamas movement that's taken hold of so many parts of our society, I understood that we needed to start thinking about domestic anti-Semitism issues. And so I started to advocate for that now, and I have advocated for bringing a whole of government approach to fighting domestic anti-Semitism. What's incredible about the Trump administration is that they have done exactly that. Now, there's no one who's been appointed to a particular commissioner or czar role domestically. However, we see that 10 days after President Trump came into office, this second term, he issued an executive order which requires all the federal agencies within 30 days to report back to him, to the White House, on what steps they're taking and what powers of their own federal agencies they're using to combat anti-Semitism. And then we see Leo Terrell at the Department of Justice come in, and he puts together an interagency task force and bringing together exactly all the federal agencies, talking together, working collaboratively to use all those federal government powers.
Wait, before you go on, Ellie,
great progress.
Ellie, what I'd like you to tell us is what are these federal agencies? Because you read and eat and sleep these things, but me and our listeners, we don't see it on such a deep level. So what do you mean by federal agencies? Let's start at the beginning.
Okay. So I'm gonna jump right in because it is complicated, Trudy. So first of all, let's think a little bit about the headlines we've seen, where the Columbia student Mahmoud Khalil, right, the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, goes and arrests him for his pro-terrorist activity at Columbia University. And then there's the legal case that comes in against him. So that's Department of Justice. And then there's also the whole issue of his student visa and his green card status, which goes back actually to the Department of State. The U.S. Department of State is the agency that issues visas and handles citizenship matters. So even in just the case of one person, of Mahmoud Khalil, you see 3 to 4 different government agencies had to partner together in order to arrest him, to detain him, to work on the legal case against him. And also, what we've heard Secretary of State Marco Rubio say is that because there's been a lot of lies and misinformation around these cases, where the Democrats would say, oh, where's his due process? And what Secretary Rubio has said is, when you come to the United States as a visa holder, you're a guest in this country. Had you told us when you first applied for your visa that you were going to come to the United States and support a U.S. designated foreign terrorist organization, you would never have received your visa in the first place. So it's a really incredible and powerful thing to watch, how the Trump administration has in fact already started to put into place all of what the Trump executive order demands of the administration.
Really incredible, to realize how coordinated these efforts have to be amongst various different federal agencies. I wasn't, I didn't really think about that, but it seems, when you point it out like that, it seems so natural that, that is happening, but I guess it wasn't. Just to talk about,
so that's all very, it requires a lot of coordination from the government.
So that's an incredible op-ed that you wrote back in 21, and foreshadowing what was really to come. Did you see, like in your work in the first administration, did you see that type, like anti-Semitism beneath the surface, that clued you into this, that really, made you really understand that it's here in our own country as well?
Yes, Trudy. So in fact, I think any of us who've been working to fight anti-Semitism, and whether in the United States or overseas, if you track the FBI every year issues a report on hate crime statistics, and what I had, the trend lines were very bad for American Jews, because the FBI statistics had consistently shown us that Jews were the #1 target of hate crimes by religion year over year, even though Jews are the smallest religious minority in the country, or one of the smallest. We're certainly not, the numbers certainly don't correspond, right? We're not the biggest religious group, and yet we're the greatest victim of hate crimes by religion. And so those statistics have been worrying, I think, for those of us who've been tracking for years. And again, year over year, you would look and see that the numbers were just going up, right? They were trending upwards in terms of attacks and incidents against Jews, rather than you would hope trending downwards. So the clues were all there. I would tell you also that what we saw explode on October 7th, as an example, on the college campuses, those are things, what led up to it has been building up for 30 years, 40 years plus in the United States. We know that academia has been hijacked by radicals, by Marxists. We know that, that just the radical left ideology. We know that for years there have been lies against Israel, claiming that Israel is an apartheid state, a colonialist state, complete smears, lies, and fabrication. But we know that these lies are being taught to our children. And so there's a lot lot of factors that have been there under the surface for many years. I would say, as an example, the BDS movement, the Boycott Israel movement, they've been at it for so many years, and their attempt has been completely to make young Americans hate Israel, to look at Israel as not, the Jewish people reclaiming their ancient and indigenous homeland, but the exact opposite. And so we knew that those factors were all there, and you had to believe that we weren't trending in the right direction. And so yes, I knew, Trudy, that we needed to take steps. Now, I think the part that was unpredictable was what happened on October 7th, and then again the horrible pro-Hamas sympathy movement that we suddenly see explode across the country.
So following in this new administration, is there a focus totally on, like, the new envoy? Is that new envoy focused completely on this country alone, or no, both? I mean, because it seems like our country really is in a very bad place right now, and I don't think we really have the luxury of looking to other countries and helping them out. I think we have so much work here at home, both on the college campuses and under the surface across our cities. So what has the role been redefined, and now do we have somebody really focusing in on this?
Well, I would tell you that I think the person who is focusing in on the domestic issues is Leo Terrell at the Department of Justice, but also I must talk about Secretary of Education Linda McMahon at the DOE, because that's another big part of this puzzle, where, again, very soon after she was sworn into office, Secretary McMahon, we started to hear that she was going to start holding Columbia University accountable, right? And so Columbia, we found notification that they were about to lose millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in federal government funding, and so now that's, I think, been completely confirmed that those funds are going to be withheld. And also, now we're talking about going into the billions of dollars. And we've seen the same thing at Harvard University. And there's a growing list of universities that are at threat of losing federal funding, which is, again, I mean, this can cost the universities hundreds of millions to billions of dollars, because they are not complying with Title VI laws and civil rights laws for Jewish students, which, by the way, were instituted under President Trump in his first administration in 2019, when he issued the executive order combating anti-Semitism in 2019, which for the first time in American history gave Jewish students civil rights protections. And so, Trudy, while there might not be one person who is fully tasked with looking at all of the different ways that, again, we can use the powers of the federal government to hold anti-Semites or the institutions that are allowing anti-Semitism accountable, I would say that we are seeing a very healthy model from the Trump administration, where basically every cabinet secretary is practically involved in some way in dealing with the issue. Now, going back to what you were asking about the State Department and Rabbi Yehuda Kaplan, who is the incoming Special Envoy to Combat Anti-Semitism, he still has the mandate, as required by congressional law and State Department, to work on foreign anti-Semitism, and that there is a lot to do there. But I have no doubt that Rabbi Kaplan, once he's confirmed and goes into office, that he's going to partner very closely with his colleagues across the administration and see how they can work together on the domestic issues as well.
So the question that I have is there a recognition that this is purely anti-West values? Like this, that is what's going on here. It starts with the Jews, it starts with anti-Semitism, but this is anti-West. That's what it is. It's an attempt to take over Western civilization and institute Sharia law, and it is not limited and left by itself to anti-Semitism. So, do you think that there is an understanding of that you know that the administration sees that people in government see that? Because to not see that piece of the equation here is such a mistake. This is anti-West values, pure and simple.
100%. And I think the evidence for that is, if you remember, if our audience can remember, when Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu came into the United States to speak under Biden, he came to speak to the U.S. Congress, and outside, this pro-Hamas so-called protesters, but I call them mobs, they were tearing down the American flag. I believe it was Union Station in Washington, D.C., tearing down the American flag and hoisting in its place the Palestinian flag. And they were defacing American historical monuments and waving the Palestinian flag and burning the American flag. So when you look at that, right, and we've seen that kind of pattern all over the country, when, frankly, the Biden administration was not taking enough steps to do much of anything to bring an end to this pro-terror movement. When you look at that footage that all of us saw for so many months after October 7th, it was clear. I mean, they are not hiding it. These people are not hiding that they hate America even more than they hate Israel. And frankly, the Jewish people. I mean, this is the part, Trudy, that you and I didn't talk about yet. But there's a lot of people who would gaslight us and say, well, this is just about Israel, it's not about Jews. But what we saw is that, in fact, it's Jews in America that are being assaulted and attacked. It's Jewish college students in America who can't walk across the campus safely and have to hide their Jewish identity. It's Jewish fraternity and sorority houses that are getting spray painted with Nazi swastikas, right? It has nothing to do with Israel. These are just Jews in America living as a religious minority and having their civil rights taken away from them. And so this is one of the big lies that we're facing. But yes, to your point, absolutely, this is an anti-Western civilization movement. This is a movement that seeks to, again, see the United States and all of our values destroyed. They are here to destroy us. They're here to undermine us. And we've heard this from senior Trump administration cabinet secretaries and officials. They have said, we've heard it from Secretary Rubio and others, if you come here to undermine our society, we're going to deport you. And that is exactly the right policy. We must deport people who come in here specifically to undermine our freedoms, our Constitution, our way of life.
So it's good to hear that is going on. Do you feel optimistic? Do you feel that the trend that's happening can be reversed? Do you see us going back to a pre-October 7th type of society?
Well, I think we have a big fight on our hands, Trudy, but I would say yes. For the first time in so long, I'm optimistic, because when we were in the campaign cycle and there was the possibility of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden before her winning, what we knew was that would mean 4 more years of the same. And frankly, I think this country was in such a downward trajectory, we could not have afforded 4 more years of what we were experiencing at that time. And I can tell you that a lot of my Jewish friends and family members were having kitchen table conversations where they were literally wondering if America was any longer safe for Jews and if they needed to start having plans for moving and living elsewhere. That's how bad it was under the previous administration. So these the efforts that the Trump administration has already put into place in the first 100 days, let's remember it's only been 100 days now, has left me very, very optimistic. I do think that the tide can turn. But look, we're feeling a lot of pushback. You've got all these cases, a number of cases that are in the court system where the judges seem to be siding with these foreign nationals. And so it seems like there's going to be numerous court cases that are going to try to slow down the Trump administration on the deportations and the handling of the visas in those situations. You will see Harvard University, not only are they not willing to tackle their anti-Semitism problem, but instead of doing that, they're fighting the Trump administration. And now they're trying to sue the Trump administration because they think somehow the U.S. government owes them money. So the fight is there; it's on our hands. But what gives me hope and confidence is just knowing that we have people now in the Trump administration in office who really get it. They have moral clarity. They know that this is in fact an anti-American, anti-Western, and anti-Semitic movement, and they're gonna, they're taking them on in every way that the U.S. government can. So it does leave me much more optimistic than I was before the election.
So that's great to hear, and it's great to hear from somebody who is on the inside and somebody who really knows what's happening. So that is, good to feel that optimism. Before we conclude, though, I do want to ask you one other thing. As someone who fled, Ellie, you fled the Iranian regime and later served in the United States government. How do you view the connection between today's surge in global anti-Semitism and the influence of regimes like Iran or just Iran?
This is a fantastic question, Trudy. So just to share a little bit with your audience, I was born in Iran, like you said, to a Jewish family, and the Jews in Iran, ancient Persia, are one of the most ancient Jewish communities in the world. Fast forward to 1979, Ayatollah Khomeini comes into power, brings in his radical Islamic regime. And one of the first things they do is they execute the president of the Jewish community, Mr. Habib el-Hanayan. And that was a big signal. The Jews understood there were about 100,000 Jews living in Iran. We understood that our lives were at threat. My father, my parents understood. And so we quickly left the country. We were on one of the last airplanes out, and we were so blessed to come to the United States of America. We were given refugee status. We were legal immigrants, and so I'm so blessed and fortunate to have been raised in the U.S. What I can tell you is that as someone who has been an observer of the Middle East, student of the Middle East, and Iran specifically, it is very concerning that, in fact, the Iranian regime has been pumping millions of dollars of their funds to fund pro-terror activity all around the world. And one example of that I've shared with audiences is what's called Al-Quds Day. Al-Quds in Arabic means Jerusalem. It's the last Friday of Ramadan. This was a creation of the Iranian regime, that they wanted to make a day around the world where they're basically calling for the destruction of Israel and Jerusalem as we know it, and that they're going to quote unquote reconquer Jerusalem. And Al-Quds Day has become a hate fest all around the world. We see it in European capitals, and so unfortunately, I think that was the model for what happened around the world after October 7th, because we saw that there was a huge level of organization in the pro-Hamas movement. It was not organic. It didn't spring up overnight. Look, before Israel had even a chance to bury their dead, we started to see people going out there and chanting from the river to the sea. And they had flags, and they were organized, and they were out in the thousands. And so this is, the audience must understand that these kinds of activities do not happen organically. It means that there's funding and there's organization. And so that is definitely one of the challenges ahead of us, is to get to the bottom of all that and try to understand who the forces are that are in fact trying to destroy our country.
So these are great points that you made, and a lot for us to think about and to understand, and to to just mill over as we see the country that we that we know and love, becomes, such a very difficult place for us right now. So I have to say you've been very optimistic, and I think that's fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us and for everything that you do to stand up for truth, for Israel, for the Jewish people. Your voice is courageous and deeply needed right now. To our listeners, thank you for joining us. This has been Nothing But the Truth with Trudy Stern. You can catch us every Thursday at 9:30 on the radio, 9:30 p.m. on the radio. And if you missed any part of this show or want to listen to any of our past episodes, you can find Nothing But the Truth wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, stay strong, stay informed, and keep seeking nothing but the truth.